Welcome back in, everyone, to another edition of the 70 Chipcast. I am your host, Robert Zenvire, and sitting virtually across from me, as always, is Ben Parker. And this sucks, man. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Um, this has been one of the most disappointing seasons probably since 2013. I think I mentioned that a couple times on
Oh,
this show where you had expectations going in, and they were so massive based on the previous season. And then for it to all just come crumbling down in such spectacular fashion, especially this year, is just it's gut wrenching. It's very discouraging because it just feels like the old times, even though it's not the old times. I think that's the worst part of it. And Sunday was just an absolute massacre. Um, even during this 5 game losing streak now, up until this point, it always felt like they brought the energy. It always felt like there was like that sense of urgency there that even though the defense was getting absolutely cooked, that they had that fight in them. And I didn't see that on Sunday at all. I just saw a defense that was completely just, I don't know, tuned out is the right verb or right phrase for that, but they weren't disinterested. It just seemed like they knew that they weren't good enough. Like they lacked the confidence. And it showed because they were getting killed all game long from start to finish. They forced no punts, no turnovers, and I mean they Detroit scored on all 7 drives. So I mean that's that.
yeah. Listen, we're going to go light on analytics, and we're not going to talk much about the Detroit game. It almost feels like we're paying karma for having such a fantasy year last year. Like it's all coming back in reverse. We're paying the price for it this year because the play has been inexplicably bad, and then the injuries have just been piling on. And you're like, what is this the price for? Hopefully next year is not the price for this too, right? Hopefully it stops with this season.
Yeah.
It's been so bad. So we're going light on analytics in terms of the games themselves. We've got some other analytics we're going to approach tonight. But when we're playing this bad and losing by this much, there's nothing to analyze. You know, I there's just not a lot to analyze. It's just bad play all the way around, and you can't say, well, if we just get a little bit better on third downs, we got a chance, or if, boy, the running game showed some hope last week. We just, give that guy some more carries. There's no tweaking here that's going to fix this. You come out each week and you play hard, but there's no analysis that needs to be done on this when it's this bad. I mean, it's been an avalanche. It has been a crushing under of scores pretty much ever since the Bears game, right? I mean
Hmm.
that that Bears awful ending, and yet after that, the whole bridge has collapsed. All the supports have collapsed. Everything has collapsed. So look, there's just nothing to analyze here. So we're going to go a little light on analytics. And I know everybody's disappointed with this, not just us fans. The players are not enjoying this. I know the coaches are not enjoying this. I know the owner's not enjoying this. It's bad for everybody all the way around. We're going to get into that. Just, how bad is it from a statistical standpoint? We're going to jump into that here in a second. But you're right. It's not fun. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're going to keep trying, keep putting out, keep presenting. But this season's gotten pretty much gotten away from us.
Well, I did, as far as analytics, as far as the game goes, I will say this. Mariota didn't play bad. He didn't play great, but he didn't play bad. He played well enough for what you would expect a backed up quarterback to play to keep your team in the game. Um, it was really just the defense. They couldn't get a single stop to save their life. They couldn't create a turnover. They couldn't do anything to give their offense a chance to stay competitive. Now I'm not saying Mariota was lighting up the scoreboard or anything like because they weren't, right? But he was productive. He made some good throws. He took chances. When he was trying to stretch the field, which is something that we didn't really see early on in the year. So I was glad to see that. Uh, my main issue again was the defense and then the lack of a consistent running game. Uh, when you have those two things, it's impossible to win, and especially with a backup quarterback, that's a lot to ask. But he protected the ball. There was no turnovers. So I guess I just wanted to give credit where credit is due that he didn't play a bad game. That he did everything you can ask a backup quarterback to do. And then also I'll just throw out a because we're not doing roasted toasted this week because there's no point. Um, if we're being honest. Um, Chris Rodriguez, I mean, he again continues to make the most of his opportunities, and then Laramie Tunsil as well. I mean, he didn't allow a single pressure or a sack or anything, and he was going up against one of the best, Nathan Hutchinson. So just wanted to throw those few names out there that it wasn't a complete uh, awful game, and like there's some individual performances. So Mariota, Tunsil, and Rodriguez, I feel like they deserve some credit because they did play pretty well given the circumstances. But as a team, when the whole team is not gelling together, when they're not supporting each other, it's hard for even the most talented teams to win.
Last week it was the punter. This week we have the backup quarterback. So,
Yeah.
congratulations, guys.
Yep. Congrats. All right. So this is going to be kind of our main focus tonight. It's look, let's start on the right here. These are the current standings in the NFC. So could we, if Jaden Daniels were to return Monday or Sunday night against, which I don't even think it's going to be a Sunday night game if that game can get flexed. Um, if we beat Miami and then Jaden Daniels returns after the bye week to face the Denver Broncos on Sunday Night Football, and we go on this historic run, right, of winning every single game the rest of the regular season, that would put us at 10-7. That more likely than not would still not be enough. Um, Looking at the current standings, Chicago would have to lose 5 of their last 9 games because they hold a tiebreaker against us head to head, which isn't impossible looking at their schedule, but still, it's not likely. Or Green Bay would have to lose 5 of their final 10 games, if I did my math, or final 9 games or whatever. Even then, even if that all happens, you still have San Francisco. You still have teams like Carolina, who I don't know what the heck's gone into them. They've actually been somewhat decent. And then Minnesota, if JJ McCarthy ever stays healthy and gets kind of things worked out there. And then Dallas too. I mean, you got to beat them out as well. You got to, you got another game against them, and you got to try to beat them out because if all that happens, then they're going to be right back in the running too. So they're a game and a half ahead of us now. It's just not looking likely. Even if you're super optimistic and say, "Hey, we can get things turned around." Dan Quinn acting as the defensive coordinator, calling the plays, maybe that'll get guys energized and all that. Even if, right, even if we were to go on this heck of a run, winning 7 straight games, it's more likely than not going to be enough. And that's just the reality of the situation. I'll let you kind of give your thoughts on that because it's not statistically impossible, but it's very, very unlikely.
Yeah, it's a great point, the math of it. And I want to separate two things here. Number one is my attitude as a member of the team or as a member of the coaching staff or as a member of the front office is we go out every day, every week, we do our work, we scratch, we claw, we try to get the team better, we try to win games. That's the mindset and the attitude. But you and I sitting here on the outside looking at what might be, it is extremely, and you're dead on it here with the stats. It is extremely unlikely that even if we win every game, which I don't know how we're going to do that, but let's assume we go on a heater here and win every game and we finish, like you said, 10-7. Statistically, it's still more unlikely that we still don't make the playoffs because you have the Bears and the 49ers, both of whom would need to collapse. Not one of them, both of them, right? Because we assume the Packers aren't going to collapse. So we would need both the Bears and the 49ers to collapse. For both of those teams to do that, one yes. Matter of fact, it's even probable that one of those teams slides, but it's very unlikely that both of those teams slide while also us going on a heater. So, attitude inside the building has got to be let's get to work, let's get after it. Viewed from afar, though, we realize there just isn't much hope here. It's not like the sixth and seventh place teams are at 500 or below 500. They're both sitting 2 and 3 games above 500, and we're 4 below. So the math just is not working out at this point.
No, it's not. And even going back to our to our off-season conversations leading up to the season when we were making our predictions, we said that, 10-7 didn't do it last year. It might not do it this year. And I think I
Might
had
not.
predicted a 10-7, 11-6 type of season,
Mm-hmm.
which just isn't looking good now. But I said, like, hey, we might have to squeak in as a wild card team. And that was obviously me thinking that, we had a perfect Jaden Daniels and that he was going to play like he did last year, if not improve some. And that was getting this roster to get to that point because I think our roster in spots was better, but we just lacked depth, and that's rearing its ugly head. You know, I hate to be right on that one. That's one of the things I wish I wasn't right on, but we both kind of saw it coming. Just we didn't think it was going to be this intense and this ugly this soon in the season. Like we're not even to Thanksgiving yet, and we're already saying the season's kind of over, which is typically that only happens with a handful of teams, and unfortunately, we're part of that handful.
Yeah, and listen, this is not where I thought we would be. I didn't think we would be riding the waves and having the fantasy season we had last year. I thought, but at this point in the season, we'd be sitting somewhere around sixth or seventh. I thought we'd be either just at or above 500. And the past 4 or 5 weeks now, I've lost count. It's been a complete collapse. So, not where I thought we'd be. It's going to be hard to dig out of it. At this point, I think you just don't worry about trying to make the playoffs or dig out of it. You just focus on each week. And, that's, in a separate episode, you guys will see it. We will focus on the Dolphins game. Tonight, though, we're a little bit more focused on how the rest of the season continues to work out and then some off-season stuff as well.
So, just a few updates. I did mention earlier that Dan Quinn is now the defensive coordinator, acting as the defensive coordinator. He'll be calling plays. He'll be handling all those duties. Joe Witt was not fired. Dan Quinn's a loyal person to his staff, which is a good and a bad thing, I suppose. So it kind of leaves the question open. Okay, we're going to year three. We're already having to replace major parts of our staff. We'll get into in a minute. We're gonna have to replace major parts of our roster. Um, and we have a bunch of young guys that can't seem to stay healthy or just haven't really proven anything to this point. And Trey Amos, not saying that I mean, he was playing well. I think he was kind of going through a bit of a rough spot, but his season ending this early, that's not good for his development. You need him to get live reps, even if it's bad. Even if we're the worst defense in all of football, right? You still need him getting those live reps and developing at that corner position. So it's not just unfortunate for our competitive chances. It's just unfortunate for him because he's missing some very valuable time in his development. Traylon Burks, kind of the same thing. Like he hasn't really caught on as a pro. He's had a lot of injuries, and he hasn't made the trip out to Madrid because he's out with this finger thing that he's got going on. And Deron Payne, I just gotta say, I'm disappointed. Uh, First of all, the lack of IQ that you just want to just in the action of itself. You're gonna punch somebody with a helmet on. Like I've never understood that. Um, like you're not wearing metal gloves, like you're just wearing, your regular football gloves, and you think that punching someone in the side of the head is actually gonna do something. That's just not gonna happen. I mean, that doesn't do anything. So, and this was after he was voted captain. So, like I'm kind of done with Rampage at this point. You know, he gets voted captain. His first order of business is to go out and punch someone in the head. Um,
Set the tone, baby.
Setting the tone, man. So I don't care who punched first. It's stupid. You know, I
If you
saw a
can't win the
tweet.
game, just win the fight.
Yeah, I saw there was a tweet from one of the beat reporters was like there should be an automatic 2 game suspension for sheer stupidity, if nothing else. And we did sign an edge defender, played for Chicago last year. That has 26 and a half career sacks in 8 seasons, which isn't bad. Just again, kind of bleh, kind of meh. You know, nothing to write home about. Just kind of average. Obviously, the big sticking point here is Amos being on IR and Joe Witt no longer being the defensive coordinator. Um, I don't know that there's anyone on staff that Dan Quinn's going to look to elevate in the offseason. Um, I don't know. Like my guess is they'd have to bring in someone from the outside, but now we're going to go into year three instilling probably a brand new defense, which may or may not be a good thing. Depends on how you look at things. Um, I mean that in itself is just not good, right?
No, it's not. I'm going to stay on the Dan Quinn thing here because it's something I said last week I wanted to see happen. I wanted Dan Quinn to take back over as defensive coordinator. I'd really love to see him take that on next year as well. You know, you've got enough moving parts here because you mentioned how many moving parts we're going to have. If you've got enough moving parts, I wouldn't want to bring somebody else in and to some degree start over here on defense. You know, you've already been drafted a certain way here. I would want Dan Quinn to just own this. And you know, when he's got a season this bad, next year he could be on the hot seat. He's not this year, I don't think. That would surprise me. But next year, if he had another bad season, so really, I think he needs to take back control of this defense. It's one of the things. Well, it is the thing he's shown that he's really good at. You know, he has shown that he is really good at building defenses. So I think he needs to get on with it. Um, you know, I understand coaches want to do the CEO thing where you're just overseeing everything and it feels better because you don't have to be involved in every single little detail. You can trust your staff to do that and you oversee things. But if it's not working, and listen, they didn't have good defense last year, you know? So this is 2 seasons of bad defense. We know a guy who's pretty good at building defenses, and his name is Dan Quinn. So I really feel like Dan Quinn needs to take complete ownership of this defense, not just this year, but next year. And I really feel like that's what needs to happen.
You know, I would be on board with that. Um, I just don't know if I don't know how much pressure Harris and Peters are going to be putting on him. Um, if it gets really bad, like I'm talking like 3-14 bad, Dan Quinn might not have a job at the end of the season, which is crazy to think given of what happened
Right.
last year. But
Right.
I think that's situation dependent as well. Okay, do you bring Jane back? Do you not bring Jane back? I don't know. I don't even want to think about that really. I don't want to think about starting over again. Uh, it it's hard because I feel like Dan Quinn. We saw glimpses of it last week where he might still have the respect of the guys, but it's not being shown on the field because of all the shenanigans that happened. You know, at the beginning of the game. You know, I feel like he's starting to lose. Maybe not the locker room, but he's starting to lose control over his guys, which is just as bad in some ways, if not worse. So that's not a good look. He's got to get things tightened up. And Dan Quinn is kind of like we've said it before. You know, we said it with Ron Rivera when he was here that these rah defensive coordinator types that are just kind of in your face. You know, even though they're players, coaches. You know, they have a shelf life, and it just depends on the coach and how long that lasts, and his effectiveness. So I hope he's not one of those guys, but he's always seemed like one of them, and he had a shelf life in Atlanta, and he'll have a shelf life here. I just hope it doesn't already run out at the end of the season.
It's a good point. And listen, we've seen that right from, I don't know about week one against the Giants, but every week since then, it's been a bad look. It's been undisciplined, right? Every single week. And, you look around the NFL, you see the good teams aren't doing that. And even specifically, I'll mention the game that I got to watch on Sunday, and that was the Buccaneers versus the Patriots. And you could see it on the field how these teams, it's not that they play mistake free football, but they generally are disciplined, smart, and not beating themselves. And, even the announcers talked about that some. But you could just see it in those two teams, and you look back over at the Commanders, what we've seen almost every game this year. Like, man, every game this year, just about, we are killing ourselves and we're undisciplined. So that's not a good look. To me, that makes it all the more important that Dan Quinn gets in there to do the work and get this defense under control as much as he can this year, which may not be much, and then definitely all through the offseason and next year. He needs to be the architect, the builder, the designer, everything for this defense and get that locked down. And Kingsbury can handle the offense. Again, I don't think Kingsbury is a top 5 play caller, but I think he's fine. And I think these two guys just need to buckle down these two sides, and then Quinn's just going to have to do the best he can with overviewing the whole team and making the calls and everything for the whole team. There are guys who do it. There are plenty of guys who do both. So who coordinate basically and oversee the team. That's just the way it is. So if Quinn wants to keep his job, like you said, if he goes 3-14, he might be out the door anyway. But let's assume he doesn't go 3-14, right? Let's assume he goes 5-6 wins on the year. If they catch that, he's around for next year, but he has got to get this defense on lockdown. I really feel like that's the way to go here.
So this is kind of a transition into our next thing here is that Dan Quinn repeatedly last year during that big win streak, when everything was going right, everything,
Right.
like he was pressing all the right buttons, it seemed like.
Yes.
Jaden was bailing the team out left and right, where he even said on multiple occasions, like, I didn't know we were this good. It's kind of surprising that we're playing this well,
Right.
and when in reality, you look back at it, it was just Jaden, pulling a rabbit out of the hat or, pulling, doing something crazy and bailing his team out, or the defense, especially in the latter half of the year, just creating a crazy turnover at an opportune time. So you hate to say it, but it was kind of lucky. Last year there was a
Right.
lot of lucky moments or like right place, right time moments in terms of facing opponents and all that. So I think that they thought that, at the end of the year, like, wow, we made the championship game. Like, holy crap, how did we do that? We must be a really good team. And then Marcus Mariota gets up on the podium over the weekends, like, maybe we were not that team. Like, I think we need to reevaluate where we think we are internally, like our mental thought processes.
Right.
And I felt like that kind of spoke very loudly on where even the coaching staff thinks we're where we are, and I feel like that falls on Dan Quinn as well. Where I mean, you look at this team here. This is what we have going into next year. Um, where the elite talent is not in many places. I anticipate that Payne, Lattimore, Allegretti, they're all going to be gone just for cap savings reasons. That's because if they cut all of them, that would give 36.4% or 36.4 million dollars in additional cap space. Um, especially after something I can't imagine Payne being back, Lattimore injury and just bad play, and then Allegretti with the contract. Um, those are already kind of a void year anyway. The next year was so. There's not a ton of top end talent on this team. I mean, there's Tunsil, there's Daniels, if you still want to consider him kind of high elite, talent. You got Terry in there, I guess, if you want to consider him higher. elite tier. And then there's just kind of a wing and a prayer for a lot of these guys. It's like, well, can he develop? Well, maybe. Um, haven't seen tons of signs of it. I like Connerly still. I still believe in guys like Newton, Sinnott, Coleman, like that they can continue to develop into at least contributors. Um, but outside of that, man, like the team is old, um, devoid of top end elite talent, and we have a lot of cap space. But just looking at some, preliminary, like who's going to be a free agent, for next season, it's not really looking like a strong class. So we're going to have a lot of money to spend on not a lot of people, at least a lot of top end people. So um, even this part isn't even looking great.
It's an interesting point. There's so much here to talk about. So I'm more than happy to spend several minutes on this page here.
Yeah.
You make an interesting point, though, about the free agents. That is becoming more and more true based on what I've seen, what we've studied, and what I've heard other people talking about is that NFL teams are getting less and less likely to let a guy get to free agency who's actually got some value. I heard Peyton Davila talking about this on one of our sister network shows last week, and I heard Simon doing the same thing. And it's something that I had seen in last year's free agent classes because we went through every one of them. On air, we went through all the free agent groups. It's like, man, there's not a lot here, you know. And Peyton and Simon, our friends from our sister network, we're talking about more teams, even if they don't intend to keep the guy, are at least wanting to sign the guy so that they can trade him away for something. They don't want to just let him walk. And again, the key to that is you're getting higher in draft picks, right? You're getting a first or second or a third, right? You're not collecting sevenths, but that's the key to that. Free agency just is not what it used to be. It's not that nobody's available. It's not that you cannot improve your team through free agency. But boy, where's the 27-year-old who's actually going to really boost your position group? There's not, boy, that's getting really rare. It's rare now to find that at all. You're starting to kind of sift through, hey, here's a 27-year-old who hasn't been very good during his first few seasons, but he showed potential. Here's a 30-year-old who's been very good, but boy, he's on season number 9 or 10, right? That's what you're getting to start to pick from at free agency in most cases. So it at least gives you the idea that maybe if we got a guy we do like, we should be willing to pay him as opposed to just letting him go. But you can't just broad brush that. You want to go through every player, and we will. We'll revisit some of these players all throughout the offseason. I'm going to start on one right here. Lattimore for me. I mentioned this earlier in the season. I'm ready to move on from Lattimore. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. So I'm ready. I assume he'll have no trade value because of the injuries that he suffered.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's.
So I'm willing to just walk away from. I'll start with that.
Yeah. I think you glitched there, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Um,
that's fine. Yeah.
yeah, Lattimore, he's got a torn ACL. He's probably, if he even plays anymore, he's gonna sign a 1 year prove it deal with a contender, someone that doesn't have anyone to lose or anything to lose, or that just needs help. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think I glitched out there for a minute.
No, that's fine. And apologies to the audience too for whichever you heard the glitch on. I I think Lattimore has no trade value, so we're just gonna have to walk away from him, cut him loose, move on. Unfortunately, I don't want to pay that money anymore for the performance I'm getting, so I'm done with that. Alec Reddy, I'd be interested to see if we could just restructure Alec Reddy for a cheaper number because he's got to know that he may not get that number with another team. Now I get it; offensive linemen have value, and he's capable of starting on some teams, but I don't know how many teams are going to want to pay him too much. So I'd be interested in at least seeing for depth if I could get him on a lot cheaper, but that may not happen. And then Payne, yes, I'm not giving Payne an extension any more money, any more years. I'm okay with him being on the team, but that's a large cap number. So I'd love to I'd love to think about walking away from Payne, but we'll see. That one's kind of up for grabs for me right there.
I know it's one of those situations where it's like, well, are you going to get better on the market, going somewhere else?
Yeah,
And the answer
yeah,
is more likely than not no, but can I use that 16 million elsewhere? Or God forbid, can I have a guy like Drazon Newton or Johnny Newton actually step up and play? Um,
right.
because we drafted him as a second rounder. He had a lot of potential coming out of Illinois. Can he actually do something? Like I don't know, novel idea. Um, for Allegretti, I just don't want to be have a backup guard carrying a $7 million cap hit. I mean, that just seems a little excessive to me. When really the backup guard should really already be on the roster on as a third, fourth round guy. I mean, I like Brandon Coleman. I think that he still has something there that I hope the staff likes. Um, that he can be kind of, if not a starter, a quality backup, whether that be guard, whether that be tackle, whatever it ends up being. I like to hope to count on him, and then Chris Paul too. I mean, he's going to hit free agency here. I have him down here as a possible extension. Um, he was a 7th round guy at the previous with the previous regime, and he's quite frankly played very well. Now, do I want him as our starter moving forward at one of the guard spots? Not necessarily, but I'd like to keep him. I can't imagine it would take too much, maybe a 1 year, one of those like 2 year deals where we're going to put most of the money in that first year so we can move off if it doesn't work. I'd be fine with one of those deals. Um, but to me, Allegretti, I mean, I just don't want to, especially after the early season performance where granted he was going against some very good defensive lines, but he was just clearly the weak link on that offensive line. Um, I don't have much interest in bringing him, back on that cap number. Like you said, if we can get him for a severely discounted rate, yeah, sure, I'll bring him back. But as it stands, I'd rather save the money.
Yeah, I'm with you. And so what do we do with that money, right? Well, first of all, and you've already got it here on the board. I definitely want to pay Luvu. I'm more than happy to give Frankie Luvu an extension. We'll have to talk about how many years and how much money, but I personally really want to give Luvu the money. I think he will. I think he's been a help to the team, and I think he will continue to be a help to the team. And I think he's one of the top places I would want to put that money. I want to talk to Tunsil. I really do. The talent that Tunsil has always had is so obvious, And you mentioned his performance against Hutchinson this past week against the Lions in a game in which they got torched. I mean, listen, the Lions were up big. Hutchinson should have been able to just tee off, not worry about the run game at all. And still, Tunsil played that well. But, Tunsil's talent has always been obvious. He still has it, even though he's not as good as he used to be. I just don't want to hand 4 more years to Tunsil. If I could get him for another year or two at a similar cap number, I think I'm all in on that. I think I definitely want to do that. As long as he's not trying to get a 4 year contract extension, maybe a 2 year extension on top of what he's already got next year. I think I'd love to invest the money there. I think that really still would help to anchor this offensive line, which has been a problem for years, and I feel like so Luvu and Tunsil absolutely give the money to is where I would start to go with it. And the Payne number, 28 mil, dang it, boy, that was too much for anything Payne's ever done. Certainly too much for what he's playing right now. So yeah, I as much as I'm okay with him being on the roster, I'm not okay at that cap number. So agreed. Let's let Payne go as well.
Yeah, because we can put it would be 60 million in cap savings for him. I'd rather allocate that to, splitting that up over Tunsil or bringing back Debo even. Um, I don't know how I feel about a long-term extension for Debo, so that might price us out. I looked at free agent receivers for upcoming class, which, again, that can change very easily. But
Right.
he's probably the best one, and it's probably not close, just in terms of sheer talent. And here's the thing, if we learn nothing else from this season, it's that needs a target that he can rely on. And I don't necessarily know that that's Debo, but it's no one else on the market, you know? Like it's not going to be anyone else that we can bring in that's going to be all of a sudden a better wide receiver too than Debo is. And I don't think I think it's been hit and miss this year with him. Um, but again, could that be because of injuries and everything going on? I don't know. But I and again, this kind of a transition to our next conversation. We need a running mate for Terry, whether that's Debo or somebody else. We need somebody. If Terry is injured or just not, or if he's going to start, we're going to start seeing a decline here due to age. We need a guy that can step in when Terry's either double covered, out, declining. We need a running mate because what we currently have a receiver just isn't getting it done. Um, Anything else before I move on to because next we're gonna be talking about what we really need. So anything else while we're on the screen?
The only thing I will say, I'm perfectly willing to hand money to Debo, but like you said, not at 3 or 4 years. It would be a 2 year deal, is what I would be willing to offer. And I'm perfectly interested in doing that. And we didn't have Debo and Terry on the field hardly at all at the same time this year, and certainly not at full strength. Even when they were on the field together, Terry was still getting back in the game shape, as it were, and Debo was in and out. So, we never had both guys. If they were both at full strength together, I think that would have been something. But then we didn't have Jaden, out there either for several parts of this season. So if they were all healthy next year, Debo, Terry, Jaden, I think you got something to work with right there. But even having said that, yes, I would love to add somebody else here, whether it's wide receiver or tight end. We'll get to that in a second. I would love to add somebody else into this mix because it's kind of unlikely that all three guys are going to be healthy next year for the entire season, right? You figure at least one of those guys is injured next year as well.
Yeah, so kind of a perfect segue into next topic here, which is what I believe currently are our top positions of need. It's hard to say that anything on defense isn't number one, but again, you can get the defense kind of squared away, and the cupboards are kind of bare on offense because we anticipate Zach Ertz probably retiring at the end of the season. Even if he does come back, I mean, in what capacity is he coming back next season? How effective is he going to be? Noah Brown and Debo should not really be on this list here because they're technically not on the roster for next year. So you got Terry, Luke McCaffrey, and Jalen Lane. Well, quite frankly, I haven't seen enough from McCaffrey or Lane to rely on them as number two or number three receivers. As of
Right.
yet, I'm not ready to give up on them, but I haven't seen enough yet. Um, Edge rusher, we got one, one on the roster. Not happy about that. So that is definitely top priority. That's probably my number one, two, and three need going into 2026 is edge rushers, pass rushers, whether they play edge, interior, um, if they play corner and they can blitz really well. I'll take them. Anything to improve our pass rush. Um, Running back, we got Bill, who I don't know how the staff feels about Bill. They seem to be not going to him consistently, and when they do, he's not performing very well. So I don't know if it's a personality thing. I don't know if it's them not trusting him. I don't know what it is, but I don't think you can go into 2026 with him as your lead back. Not like you did. Excuse me, not like you did this year. We look at linebackers here. Uh, a bunch of late round guys and special teamers. So again, nothing great there. And then safeties. I don't care that any of these guys are under contract. I don't care if any of these guys ever return again, other than Jeremy Reeves because he's a special
Mm-hmm.
teams ace. But you can cut every single one of these guys, I'd be a-okay with it. Um, there's just nothing there. There's just a bunch of less than stellar. I would even say less than average safeties. There's not one guy that would start or maybe even be a backup on other teams. Maybe Will Harris. maybe a Quan Martin, but even after this season, I doubt it. Um, there's just nothing there in the secondary, at least in the deep half, and it's a shame, because it's like we're so edge rusher, run stoppers. Again, that's not on the list here, but linebackers to say like, my goodness, what don't we need on defense? Um, add that to wide receivers and running backs. I mean, my goodness, like the list just keeps growing and growing and growing. And then depth on top of that. It was a question mark going into the season. It's probably going to be another question mark until we get some of these draft picks, developed and into positions to where they can at least be contributors if the starter goes down. Um, I see these as our top priorities. You might have some differing opinions. I'd love to hear them.
I largely agree, and you and I talked about this beforehand, and I alluded to it a minute ago. I'm fine if we upgrade at tight end instead of wide receiver, but just a pass catcher is something. The only reason I love a tight end is because a lot of times for younger quarterbacks that are struggling, having a tight end who can consistently get open, well, there's a couple of guys in this draft who are fast who could do it. That does seem to help a lot, just kind of that close, big pass catcher. The guy who's going to be at 5 to 10 yards, he's not 20 yards downfield. He's not running a deep crosser. He's open at 5 to 10 yards, and he can even do a little bit after the catch. That does seem to help out young quarterbacks a lot. So but either way, tight end or wide receiver, totally agree. It needs to be somebody to catch passes. The defense, there's holes everywhere. We knew that going into the year, but we were cautiously optimistic about the secondary. The biggest disappointment there in the secondary has been Lattimore, unfortunately. If Lattimore had been able to hold down his spot, I think all this looks a little bit different because Amos was largely holding down his spot. We know we have guys there who can play the slot, at least to some degree. And then we knew the safeties weren't going to be great, but they were what they were. Well, with Lattimore honestly getting picked on for a large part of the season, all the burden now shifts to the safeties, and they cannot hold up under that at all, not in any way. So there's some good safeties in this draft too. I'll start with Caleb Downs coming out of Ohio State. So I don't know if we go that route or not, but boy, if you take a guy like Caleb Downs and you pair him with Trey Amos and with Mike Sanders still, that's a good, pretty good start to secondary, I would say. So got to pick out something. We are not going to be able to fix all of these needs during the offseason. We can address them all, but we'll not fix them all. But at linebacker depth, man, really you need linebackers, period. Because
Yep.
Wagner cannot be the full time guy anymore. Luvu can, Wagner cannot. But even so, the depth there. So yeah, I largely agree with all of this. Edge rusher, yeah, edge rusher is probably number one need. You've been banging on that for 2 or 3 weeks now. We all knew it. We need somebody who can get after the quarterback. Well, there's a few of those guys in this draft too. There's David Bailey coming out of Texas Tech who's explosive, but there's several other guys, man. So wherever we go, maybe even early second round, we might can get a guy still. So there are things in this draft that can help us. We'll not get them all, but we can we can largely fix some of this during this next offseason. And we knew it would be a work in progress. It always is.
Well, the unfortunate part is we don't have a second round pick due to I believe it was the Tunsil trade. There was something that there was some sort of incentive or something like that that kicked in where it transitioned from a third round pick to a second round pick. So we no longer have that one. So what we thought was going to be a low second round pick is now a very high second round pick, unfortunately. So um, probably wouldn't have done the trade if we knew that. But hindsight is 2020, and yeah, I will say if we're prioritizing here because again, so I'm looking at again what is projected to be free agents for 2026. Uh for pass rusher, nobody young and impactful. There's some names out there for uh you know like a Khalil Mack or a Trey Hendrickson. I don't think either of those guys are going to be really worth much. Hassan Reddick, but again, I mean, Joey Bosa. Like, are these 1 year deal guy? Are we gonna go the 1 year route again for a lot of guys? I mean, we're gonna have to in some spots, but I really would rather
Right.
not
Right.
do that again because then we're not creating permanent solutions or long-term solutions. Tight end, there are some guys if they don't get re-signed. There's Mark Andrews out there, which I know he's getting up there in age, but still can be a good contributor. But I doubt he's going to leave Baltimore. David Njoku's out there, Tyler Higbee's out there, Kyle Pitts. He'd be the young kind of long-term solution. But again, is he going to leave Atlanta, number one? Number two, is what you're going to end up paying him, is he going to, like, what's going to be the return on that? Because he's been kind of up and down throughout his career. There's some
Right.
other
Right.
guys in there that would be serviceable starters, but long-term solutions don't know about that. Um, Linebackers, man, there's not a lot there. Not a lot of youth, at least. Um, there's definitely some experienced guys that might be available, but the one guy, again, I don't know that he'd be leaving, would be Quay Walker from Green Bay. But again, does he end up leaving? I doubt it. And even if he does leave, um, would we be prepared to pay that price? That I don't know. Um, so there are some names out there potentially if they do become available. Uh, how many resources do we allocate to that? I don't know. And the unfortunate part is we only have 6 draft picks, and a lot of them are lower rounds. So is it one of those situations where we get a high first round draft pick and then we can trade back at that point, which I have mixed feelings on, because if there's an elite player there, you take him. But if there's not,
Right.
like, you gotta look
Yeah.
at the whole roster, and if you
Yeah.
can get a couple extra picks and you need it to fill out the roster, which I think you do, I don't think you can come away with 6 draft picks this year. We did last year, but I don't think we have the luxury of doing that again this year. Just staying put and picking. I think it's unfortunately a need to where we got to trade back. In some spots, whether it's first round pick, third round pick, whatever it may be, we got to trade back and recoup some of this and fix this mess that we've inherited and still are dealing with, you know, because that's what it comes down to. It all goes back to the mess that was created with Ron Rivera. Like, we're still dealing with that mess, going on 3 years in. Uh, and it's unfortunate, but that it is what it is. We can't just sit around like, oh, we can't blame endlessly previous regimes, So it needs to get fixed. It needs to get fixed fast, or else Jaden will be 30 before we know it, and we'll still not have a contending roster.
Yeah. And listen, I don't think it's very much worth considering to trade back, right? Whatever that first round pick turns out to be, because while there are lots of guys I love up in the top 10, top 12, I mean, really love, it does look like it's going to be a fairly deep draft, too. So if we could cash that in, listen, I'm not talking about collecting a second, a third, and a five. I don't want that. But if I could turn a first into 2 seconds, like pick 40 and 50, that kind of thing, where I can still get two top 50 players, I'm a lot more interested, right? Even that might be a little loose, but if I could catch, I don't know, pick 28 and 43 for pick 10, right? I'm interested at that point. So I'm at least open to that. We're not going to fix this whole roster next offseason, but we've got a quarterback. We can still debate and try to figure out how good he's going to be, but we've got a guy. We've got a guy that gives us hope. That everybody was envious of us last year. We've still got him. We've got an offensive line. Offensive line isn't listed on our positions of need. How about that? It sucked for 2 or 3 years. It doesn't suck anymore. So can we still improve it? Absolutely. We should got to look at that, but it's not a huge position of need. So that's something to start with right there, you know, and you build from there. So you try to make the offense a little bit better. You try to make the defense not be quite so bad. I think you've got to start there with Trey Amos and Frankie Luvu, and I think you've got some decent rotational pieces on that defensive line. You've got to start right there. So, you're not going to fix everything. You're not going to turn great overnight, but you do try to work with what you've got. And, I'm very interested in that for sure.
All right, definitely a productive conversation. Next week we're going to it's the bye week next week, so we're probably going to be getting into this maybe on a deeper level, maybe some prospects like that you started to mention there, maybe, kind of a list of prospects there, a list of free agents potentially that we could target if they do end up not getting re-signed and they do end up leaving the current teams. Haven't completely fleshed out the idea yet, but definitely going to be some off-season talk next week during the bye week.
Yes.
Um, so stick around for that. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel here, Pro Football Enterprise, and like the video, even though it hasn't been a a super positive video. We'd still appreciate the like and any comments you have, any feedback, what you think we should do. Do you think this is a quick fix type of deal? If not, like let us know in the comments like what you think your ideas are on what should happen, because although that this season largely to me has ended up in a place where it's been primarily talent based and just a lack of depth overall, which you could consider a failure by the front office. Um, I don't put it all on Peters, because I feel like he's with what he was dealt, he's made the most of. And sure, he could have went some different directions and so forth, but I can't put it all on Peters. So it's going to be Peters going forward the next couple of seasons at least. I would imagine he has at least another season, if not two, to kind of try to get this thing worked out. So, let us know in the comments. Instead of fire Adam Peters, fire everything and start over. Like, let us know what are actually the fixes. So, if you could do that, would really appreciate it. Ben has continued releasing these player profiles for a lot of these college prospects. Um, they've been some great information. He's still working on these offensive breakdown shows on how to defend these offenses. It's been some great content that he's been putting out. So please make sure you subscribe to the channel here. Ben, anything else for our audience?
I mentioned Peyton Davila and his brother Parker earlier on the show. So two peas in a pod. You see it there on the lower left hand corner. It's one of our sister shows on the Box Score Network. So check them out. Um, they do. They actually have very good segments on that show. They have the two brothers going at it in terms of picking some players each week. They have a rather complicated setup there that's interesting to listen to. And then they go through a lot of the games each week as well for the NFL. So check that out. There's two peas in a pod, and they love the NBA. So they will usually give you a little bit of NBA, a little bit of college, and a whole lot of NFL. That's two peas in a pod. And they're very good about putting out a show every single week. So check them out.
All right, we will see you all next week. Hopefully, we'll see you all next week during the bye week, and we'll have some more off-season talk for you. So if you're into that, please make sure you stick around and please subscribe.